class, how are you? 各位同学，大家好，我是连欣欣老师，欢迎收看新闻英文2。今天我们要看的是第17个讲次 ，Chapter 17, Opinion Article Part A。我们在第17讲次当中呢，我们要读的是议论型的文章。那我们今天就要看这篇文章的这个第一个大部分。好，那我们现在呢，就先来看一下本课的学习目标。Learning objectives. 1. To study the first part of the full-length opinion article. Opinion article 呢，就是议论型的，作者表示意见的这种社论型的专栏文章。那我们今天呢，就是要看一篇专栏文章当中的第一个大段落，第一大部分。好，我们现在呢来看第二个学习重点是 to study the topic about the stereotypes of women and other relevant opinions。好，那么在今天的讲次的文章内容当中呢，我们会读到的呢是和女性有关的这个刻板印象 stereotypes， 还有其他相关的一些意见。好，在我们进入课文内容之前，我们就先来学一下本课的重点单词。我们先看第一个单词 pervasive， 形容词，普遍的，渗透的。More and more women in society have bravely begun speaking of a pervasive atmosphere of sexism。社会当中呢，有越来越多的女性开始勇敢地说出性别主义这样的普遍性的氛围。我们看第二个单词 stereotypical， 形容词，成规的，老一套的。Not all men's behaviors to conform to stereotypical images of the unfeeling male， 并非所有男人的行为呢都符合冷酷无情的男性的刻板印象。好，我们来看第三个单词 folly， 名词，愚蠢，愚笨。The article is simply a reminder of the follies of the war。这篇报道他要说的就是对战争愚蠢行为的一种提醒 ，reminder 提醒。好，我们看第四个单词 gob 名词，大量 gob。There are gobs of studies published in famous journals regarding the gender issues。好，大量关于性别议题 gender issues 性别议题的研究呢，刊载在许多著名的期刊上 famous journals。我们看下面一个单词 destined， 形容词，命中注定的，指定，预定。例句是 Many policies are destined for helping the social vulnerable groups。许多的政策呢，它是指定用来帮助社会中的弱势团体的 vulnerable groups。下面一个单词是 gender， 名词，性别。They protested hiring decisions based on age, race, or gender last week。他们上周呢抗议 protest 基于年龄、种族或者是性别而制定的雇用规定。我们看下面一个单词 awakening， 名词，意识，觉醒。The essay indicated that education should be about the awakening of mind and heart。文章中指出啊，教育呢必须是关于心智还有心灵的觉醒。我们看下面一个单词 happen， 常用介系词 to， 动词，偶然发生，引起。The chief editor happened to notice the topic raised in the meeting had already been discussed in the magazine。主编呢碰巧注意到呢，在会议上提出的一个主题啊，已经在一本杂志上呢被讨论过了。好，我们看下面一个单词 chancellor， 名词，总理或是大学的名誉校长。In 2002。He was installed as the Chancellor of the University of Birmingham。在2002年的时候呢，他被任命为伯明翰大学的名誉校长。好，我们看下面一个单词 in parts， 片语的用法，在某种程度上的或者是部分的怎么样？好，我们看例句 ：The success of the conference last week was in part owing to luck。好，上周这个会议的成功啊，在某种程度上来说呢，可说是基于幸运的关系 ，luck 幸运。我们看下面一个单词 poll， 名词，投票、选举、民意调查。 According to a poll in March, 75% of those surveyed support the policy. 根据3月份的一项民意调查显示呢，有75%的这个受访者支持 support 支持这项政策 policy 政策。好，我们看下面一个单词 marvel 常接介系词 at， 动词对什么感到惊讶，那么常含赞叹的意思。看例句的用法是 The audiences around the world marveled at his achievement in performance art。全世界的观众啊，对他在表演艺术上的成就 achievement 成就赞叹不已。好，我们看下面一个单词 maintenance 名词维持。The tables in the building had been replaced last month during routine maintenance。这栋大楼的桌子呢，在上个月定期维修的期间呢，全部都被更换。Routine maintenance 就是定期维修的意思。好，我们看下面一个单词 scrub， 动词用力擦洗。Many young people volunteered to scrub taped walls in the city yesterday。昨天许多年轻人呢 volunteer 就是自愿，他们自愿呢去擦洗在这个市区内被涂鸦scrub protect 被涂鸦的这些墙壁。好，我们看下面一个单词 comprise 动词包含包括。The musical festival will comprise 7 concerts at the National Concert Hall。好，这个 musical festival 就是音乐节。这次的音乐节呢，将由在这个国家音乐厅演出的7场音乐会 concert 这是音乐会呢来构成的。好，就是包含了7场音乐会的意思。好，我们看上面一个单词 proliferate。动词使激增，使扩散。Health clubs and private training programs began to proliferate in recent years。健康俱乐部呢，还有这种私人的训练课程在近几年来呢，开始逐渐的快速的增加。好，我们看这个字 finisher。名词，到达终点者、完工者。The top 3 finishers in each race will be qualified for the Olympic Games。每项竞赛的前3名选手呢，将有资格可以前进奥林匹克运动会。好，以上是本课的重点单词，希望同学有时间可以把这些单词呢好好研读一下。那么研读这些单词呢，将有助于大家阅读我们的课文内容。我们等会呢，将非常荣幸邀请到这篇 opinion article 的作者包端磊包神父呢，来到我们的节目当中。那么作者呢，将亲自和各位同学呢来解说他写这篇文章的一些想法和用意。那么在第一个大段落当中，就是今天我们要讲解的课文当中，我们要读到的呢，是对女性还有在美国境内对黑人的一些刻板印象。好，那么这些刻板印象呢，包含了什么样子的意象？它们是怎么形成？还有人们应不应该要有这些刻板印象呢？作者其实呢，都有非常呢独到而且深刻的见解。所以等会呢，我们希望同学和我们的作者一块的来阅读这篇文章，然后呢，在阅读的过程当中，也要一起来省思一下，在我们的生活当中，是不是应该有这些刻板印象，不要让刻板印象局限了我们对我们周边人们的认识。现在我们先休息一下，等会我们一块来读我们的课文内容。好，同学，我们现在要进行的是课文内容解说。今天我们非常开心邀请到这篇文章的作者包端磊包神父来到我们节目当中，亲自为我们解说这篇文章。那我们现在呢，先来欢迎我们的包神父。Hello, Father Bar, how are you? Could you please say hello to our students?
Hello, Cindy, and hello, all of you. I'm very happy to be here with you.
好，那我们现在呢就开始呢来看一下我们这个篇课文的这个标题，还有第一个段落，我们将请包神父为我们朗读。那么也希望同学和我们一起和包神父呢来朗读这篇文章。我们现在就一起来看一下第一个段落。
Differences fuel silly stereotypes. National Yangming University was the site this past week of an international conference on the role of women in science. One report on the conference in a local paper noted the words of Arthur Chen, director of Yang Ming's Center of International Affairs. He spoke of the pervasive influence of stereotypes in our lives. Many girls may have been discouraged by their families from choosing science as their major since they were little, said Chen. Even if they were interested in science. This is because our society traditionally still believes girls should major in subjects such as literature.
好的，那么在这个大段落当中呢，我们就是看到了这篇文章的开头。那么想请神父来跟我们讲一下，就是您当初为什么会想要来写这样的一篇这个社论呢？
Well, 第一个理由 Cindy 是因为当时我们有一个研讨会议在阳明山那里，有不少的教授、同学都来参与这个讨论，这是关于女孩子、女士当学生的时候、年轻的时候，他们想到毕业了以后在社会上能够找什么样的工作。
是，所以我们刚刚看到，在这3个短篇的段落当中呢，作者也就是 Father Barr 他的提到了他参加这个阳明大学的一场 conference 研讨会。那么在这个研讨会当中呢，就有提到女性还有这个女孩子们她们在学习这个科学她们这条路上的一些景况。 好，那我们接下来 ，So Father, in the following paragraph, will you say more about your opinion or your thoughts on this issue?
Well, as a matter of fact, yes, Cindy. I'll be in the column talking about stereotypes. That means standard ideas that probably all of us have in different ways in our lives, that boys or men should be a certain way or should be excited about studying in a certain field, and that girls and women are different and should somehow find an interest in a different kind of work or a different form of a field of study. And my argument is that we should not overemphasize whether a student is male or female. We should allow boys and girls, when they're young, to develop whatever natural interests and abilities that they have, whether it be in the sciences, mathematics, philosophy, literature, whatever. Whether you're a boy or a girl when you're young, it doesn't make that much difference. What would you like to learn about?
Yes. 好的，那么刚刚神父就跟我们讲说，他在这篇文章当中，其实他提到的就是 stereotype 这个刻板印象。那么尤其是男孩子和女孩子的刻板印象，那尤其是男生跟女生，如果你还年轻，正在选择你想要学习的科目的话，那其实这个学习什么样的科目，不管是科学也好、数学也好、哲学也好，和你的性别呢，应该是没有关系的。那么但是呢，我们在社会当中传统的刻板印象认为女孩子就应该念文学，男孩子就应该念理工科目，这样的刻板印象其实就会限制了年轻男孩女孩们的一些选择。那但是这样的刻板印象到底该不该存在呢？这就是神父在这篇文章当中呢，想要和大家一起来讨论的。好，那么接下来我们再往上面看其他的段落。
Educators are not the only ones concerned about stereotypical thinking. Plenty of folks with varied backgrounds see the obvious folly of imagining that great gobs of girls and women are destined for excellence in only certain fields simply because of their gender.
好，那么在这段落当中，我们看到有一些片语啊。那么，Father, in your article, you mentioned plenty of folks, so you use some phrases to say a lot of or a group of girls. Can you say a little bit on your thoughts here in this paragraph?
Sure, Cindy. Well, that word folly it means foolishness. It means not really thinking through a situation more deeply. And what I mean by this folly here in the situation is the automatic assumption that, as I was saying a little bit ago, that girls or women should only be talented or are only gifted for certain fields of study. And my argument is that we all have talents, whether we're male or female, and it's foolish, it's a folly to think otherwise. Allow people to develop as they are.
Yes, so folly 这个字呢，它特别指的就是很傻的、很愚蠢的想法。那么就是说，如果我们把男孩子和女孩子都定型在某一个刻板印象里面，认为女孩子只能做什么，男孩子只能做什么，那样子的想法对神父来讲呢，这个是不明智的。是很傻的想法。那么不管男孩或女孩，每一个人都有自己的 talent， 每个人都有自己的专长才能所在。那么应该是要按照自己的天赋尽情的去发挥，而不是受限于刻板印象或是自己的性别里面。
Right.
Is that what you want to say?
That's exactly what I'm saying.
Okay.
And
yes.
And it's a certain sense of fairness that's also involved here. That it's not really fair to judge a person only by their gender in terms of what their abilities or what kind of service they could offer to society. These young people of ours, our young friends, after they graduate from school.
Okay. So Father also mentioned fairness, 一种公平性就是说你能为社会提供的服务和贡献，那么应该用一种公平的角度来看待，而不是从性别去规范或局限了你可以为这个社会所做的贡献和服务。那么这样的想法呢，其实是很狭隘、不公平，那当然也是很傻的。好，那我们再往上来看，神父还有什么要跟我们说的？我们来看后面的段落。
Most thinking people are able to connect the dots. They recognize that barriers for women of many cultures have rightfully fallen in recent years all across the board. Politics particularly seems to have arrived at the days of great awakening. Names of leaders who just happen to also be women are by now the stuff of everyday news. Angela Merkel, Chancellor of Germany, Secretary of Defense Condoleezza Rice, and Politico's Pelosi, Sarah Palin, and Hillary Clinton of the United States, Tzipi Livni, Premier Designate of Israel, and President Cristina Fernandez of Argentina readily come to mind.
好，那么在这个段落当中，我们也是一样看到很多人名，然后还有一些呢蛮特别的一些片语。我们这边呢就先来请教包老师、包神父这边。Here you mentioned connected dots. What does it mean? What does this phrase mean?
Well, to connect the dots, Cindy, means that we draw a line connecting one moment of experience or one piece of interesting international news with another piece of news or another interesting phenomenon that's happening in our world. So, for example, if there's one dot in Germany in the political sector, so that the chancellor of the country is a woman, Miss Merkel, and we connect that dot with Condoleezza Rice in the United States, who several years ago served the president and the people of the United States as a Secretary of State, actually.
Yes, connected dot 那个 dot 就是一点一点 ，connected dot 就是我们像在图画书里面的连连看这样子的意思。那么在这呢，作者就是提到了他等一下提到的例子当中会从比如像这个德国的这个领袖的女性人物，然后连到美国的国务卿，过去的话是莱斯，那现在的话当然是希拉蕊，所以这样连连看就是说把几个地方的事情呢连串在一起来做思考。那 there's another interesting phrase across the board. And the day of great awakening.
Right.
Yes, what do they mean, and why do you use those phrases here in this paragraph?
Well, good questions, Professor Cindy. Across the board means on a grand scale, over a passage of time in many different places, we can really see more or less the same phenomena occurring. Okay, so it's in general that's the situation.
Okay. 好 ，across the board 呢，基本上呢就是说，你可以看到就是跨越这个邦界的，那么就是 in general 大部分来看的话，可以看到很多相类似的情况。那么在这两段当中呢，我想这个作者就是要告诉我们说，这个女性的这样的领导人物，尤其在政治界呢，其实已经窜出头来了。那我们看到世界各地呢很多的例子那在这里呢，给我们的读者一个很好的提醒：女生或者女性，她不是只是因为性别关系局限在一个领域而已。那么在政治界，我们看到很多女性其实已经在世界各地崭露头角了。好，那我们现在就先休息一下，等会我们再继续我们课文的解说。 好，我们刚刚已经看了这篇文章的前面几个段落，接下来我们再往下看。那么我们的作者呢，将在后面段落当中呢，给我们看到呢，更多的一些例子。那我们现在就来一块呢，和包神父来阅读一下我们的文章。
A conference this week in Taipei, designed in part to open society's mind about stereotypes about girls and women, and we ought to push open the doors of our minds about other stereotypes we may harbor as well. Voters in the United States head to the polls in a matter of hours to choose their next president. Columnist Nicholas Kristof recently wrote of a Chinese friend who marvels at the thought of Barack Obama winning the election.
好，那么在这个段落当中呢，很显然的，保尔神父呢就是从刚刚的这个女性的一些刻板印象，还有突破女性刻板印象的一些例子，那么转移到其他的例子了。So Father, so now you are talking about another example on stereotype, is that right?
That's right. The earlier stereotype,
Right.
Cindy, had a reference to girls and women in society and so on.
Yes.
So this other stereotype I'm bringing up is would be the color of a person's skin,
Right.
race. And it just happened that at the time I wrote this particular
Yes.
column, the American people were preparing to vote for the new president. That
Yes.
was some time ago. And
Yes.
of course, President Obama is an African American.
Right.
And so some people were amazed that the people of the United States
Yes.
would actually choose an African American to be our new president. But that's
Yes.
exactly what happened.
OK， 好，那么在前面段落当中呢，刚刚作者包神父他所提到的呢是这个对女性的刻板印象。那么但是现在在后面这些段落当中呢，神父即将要提到的呢是这个对于人们的肤色的刻板印象。那么在神父在写这篇文章的时候，那时候美国正在进行总统的大选，那么很多的这个投票者呢都在考虑要把票呢投给奥巴马。那我们知道他是这个非裔美籍的一位黑人的总统所以这个就是神父呢他在后面段落当中呢要来和大家讨论的一个重点。好，那我们接下来呢再往后面读其他的段落。
Aren't blacks typically capable of lowly maintenance jobs, scrubbing floors or factory work at less than enviable pay? How could Americans seriously consider putting a black at the head of their government? I wonder how aware Christoph's friend is of a similar irony that operated in the historically exhausting campaign of Hillary Clinton for the same position Senator Obama seeks.
So, Father, here can I ask you a question here in this paragraph? You mentioned Obama and Hillary together, and then, why do you make them in comparison? What would you like to say here?
Well, what I'm trying to remind readers of, Cindy, is that Hillary Clinton at that time had been running for the nomination for the presidency in the Democratic Party,
Yes.
and her opponent, her main opponent, was the future president,
Yes.
President Obama. So here we had a black African-American senator
Right.
running for the nomination of his party. In the
Yes.
same party, we had Hillary Clinton, a woman.
Yes.
Never before had the people of the United States ever chosen
Right.
either an African-American or a woman for their
Yes.
president. And at this time, for the Democratic Party, those were our two representatives
Right.
fighting neck and neck. And
Okay.
in the end, it was a very close decision
Yes.
in the party itself.
好，那所以这边神父要提到，就是说呢，在美国在总统竞选的这样子的历史跟过程当中呢，从来没有就是说大家考虑过一位女性候选人，然后跟一位黑人的候选人。那么但是在这一年，就是神父在写这篇文章的时候呢，这个民主党里面呢，他们内部的选举当中就出现了一位黑人候选人跟女性的候选人而且呢，他们彼此之间呢是势均力敌的。那所以这两个其实都代表的非常一般来讲，长久以来大家都有的一些刻板印象所以这是一个非常特殊的一个例子。So what did you think about these two candidates? To you, these two candidates represented two kind of stereotypes. Is that what you mean?
Well, I was just thinking at the time I wrote the column, Cindy, that readers need, and we all need to see that it would be ridiculous to overemphasize the color of Mr. Obama or the gender of Mrs. Clinton. I mean, both of these very capable human beings would have made a terrific president, in my opinion. By the way, I'm a rather devoted Democrat myself, so I have a bias in favor of their way of doing politics and thinking about world problems.
OK， 所以神父这边要提出来，就是说呢，如果呢大家在看这个候选人的时候，只是看他的肤色或者看他的性别，这种想法是 ridiculous。ridiculous means 就是很荒诞的其实不需要的。其实他们两个都是非常有能力的候选人，所以如果我们要看候选人的背景跟能力的话，其实应该着重在他们能力上面，而不是呢他们的肤色或者他们的性别。那这是作者他在这个段落当中呢想要提醒大家的地方。好，那么接下来后面还有其他的段落，我们再一起和作者呢来念一下后面的段落。
Perhaps African Americans comprise the single largest group of people in the United States about whom stereotypes must proliferate. Might women only rank as second-place finishers when it comes to attracting stereotypical images?
So Father, proliferating, what does this word mean?
Proliferate. Wow, you know, that's a word we don't use often in speaking, Cindy, but we do use it in our writing. And proliferate means to grow very fast, very quickly, on a grand scale, and to affect many large groups of people. So, for example, nuclear armaments, the proliferation of the nuclear warhead situation during the 1960s and 70s and 80s became a great worry for all of the world.
OK， 所以神父刚刚跟我们讲到了，就是这个 proliferate 这个字呢，一般是比较用在这个写作的语言当中，那指这个大幅渲染、大幅扩张这样的意思。所以就是说，对于这个非裔美籍这样子的刻板印象，在这个美国境内或境外，可能是这个大家最普遍最常见到或联想到的一种刻板印象就是黑人他们只能做什么样的事情，不能做什么样的事情，这种刻板印象大概是大部分人最多人有的一种想法了。And then here there's another very interesting phrase as a second place and finisher. So what does it mean here?
The second place finisher, Cindy, actually it means literally just that. We have a race, a BSI of some sort. So 第一名 and 第二名，第一名、第二名大概那个差异很小，对不对？那个空间很小。So the second place finisher perhaps in American society for attracting stereotypes. First place, probably black people, African Americans, and then in the second place would probably be women. People having these foolish, old-fashioned ideas about that.
好，所以这边神父提到了，在美国的话呢，最多数的人会这个产生刻板印象的，可能是对黑人会产生最强烈的刻板印象。那么第二名会引来刻板印象的，可能就是女性，就是 gender。好，所以这边呢，他就是作者在这儿呢，就稍微做了一个比较，感觉上好像奥巴马他这个遭受到更多的这个刻板印象的这样的影响跟压力，就是和另外一位女性候选人比起来的话。好，以上呢就是我们在这个讲词当中要为大家解说的课文内容。那么这篇文章后面呢还有很精彩的这个段落，我们将在下一个讲词当中为大家再来说明。好，今天我们非常谢谢包神父，谢谢作者来到我们的节目当中，我们下周再见，谢谢，拜拜，
拜拜。